Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TSNN webinar series. Today's topic is the attendee experience, tips, tricks, and technology to keep them coming back. And we'd like to thank you for attending and to thank our sponsors, MCCA, Advantage Boston, and Market Art for bringing this presentation to you. Hi, my name's Hillary, and I'm going to be your webinar host today. I'd like to take a few seconds to go over some tips using the webinar platform. First, if you haven't used GoTo before, please note on the right-hand side of your desktop there's the control panel, and within it is an area called Audio. Please make sure you pick the correct icon, either use telephone if you've called in today, or use mic and speakers if you're tuning in from your desktop. Also, you can ask a question on Twitter by using hashtag Attendex. That's ATTENDEX. Now, this is a live and interactive program, so please note the instant messaging panel towards the bottom. Throughout the presentation, you can write in your questions, and we'll get to as many as possible. Now, please note that this presentation is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation slide deck and session recording will be available on tsnn.com within 2 working days. And now I'd like to introduce Rob Hamlin, President of Market Art, who with his team developed the You Are Here interactive map and directory for trade shows and exhibitions. And with the newly released social maps, Market Art's You Are Here interactive map directory and advertising platform combined with Presdo Match event networking platform creates a revolutionary interactive social media and mapping solution that will increase the communication and connections among attendees, exhibitors, and organizers at events, and will measure, analyze, and report on those interactions. Well, welcome, Rob. I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Hillary. And thanks, everybody, for being on. We're really pleased to be a sponsor of this webinar. It's a great topic. An awful lot going on in technology today. As Hillary said, I'm Rob Hamlin from Market Art, and we make the You Are Here map and directory system. And I have the honor today of introducing our host, Michelle Bruno. But before I do that, I just want to take a moment and welcome a special guest, Eric Lee from Presdo, who's on with us today. As you may know, Eric's the founder of LinkedIn and is now bringing that expertise in social media to this market. And there's a lot of exciting things coming out of that. So, Eric, are you on, and can you say hello?
Thanks a lot, Rob, and I'm really glad to be joining in today, and I think this will be a really interesting webinar for the entire audience. And I just want to add my welcome and to let everybody know that we're very excited to work with Market Art on the Social Maps product. So hopefully you'll hear more about that later on today.
Great. Thank you, Eric. So now let me introduce Michelle Bruno, CMP, CEM. Michelle's president of the Bruno Signature Events, which is a content strategy firm and based out of Salt Lake City. She's going to be your host and moderator today, and I think plenty of you already know Michelle or are familiar with her. She very modestly describes herself as someone who comes from the event industry and understands the trade show and conference ecosystem with a mission to chronicle the changes, innovation, technology, and digital evolution that's impacting the industry so profoundly. That's a mouthful, but she's doing an amazing job at it, and maybe you've had the chance to see some of that work. She does an awful lot of writing and blogging, especially for TSNN. I think overall the number is something just north of 150 articles she's published, white papers on this meetings and exhibition logistics world, marketing, technology. So also she does, I may have seen her, does an awful lot with CEAR, the Center for Exhibition Industry Research. In fact, it was one of those blogs that she did for tsnn.com that led to this mini-series. I think it was in September, she published a blog entitled An Attendees Trade Show Technology Wish List. And there was such an incredible response from the industry to that blog that Michelle and TSNN wanted to provide some sort of additional forum for discussing that topic. So that's really the driver behind this webinar today. And again, we're really excited about being part of this. And so here to do just that, open that topic up, let me introduce your host and moderator, Michelle Bruno.
Hi, I'm working on switching my slides. There you go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm not the most seasoned webinar presenter, so I hope the audience will bear with me. I'm a writer, and there's a reason for that. We like being behind the scenes and putting our thoughts down on paper, so this is a little bit new experience for me. But I'm really excited, and thank you so much, Rob, for that wonderful introduction. As you know, it's kind of embarrassing to be introduced to an audience, but I'm really excited about this topic because I really feel that, above all, the attendee experience is somewhat of a linchpin in terms of our industry right now. If there are no attendees, then we don't need exhibitors, and we don't need to jump through all the hoops in producing events. So, as Rob mentioned, the reason this webinar came about was a single blog post, which is kind of funny because it's probably the fastest one I've ever written. Most of my posts on my own blog and on TSNN and everywhere else take 2 to 3 hours to write and think through and document. This was one where Rachel Wimberly had me under the gun, and I just said, you know what, this is something I'm really passionate about. I'm just going to jot it down. It took me about 20 minutes, and it happened to be the most popular webinar or post topic so far that I've done for TSNN. So I want to start by just saying to you, I hope there are a lot of event planners in the audience. I really do understand your pain. I've been in your shoes. I still am in your shoes. I've been on the supplier side. I've been on the planner side, and now I'm in between on the sort of journalist side. But I understand where you're coming from in terms of trying to understand the technology, everything that's sort of coming at you right now. So I want to just take a little trip down memory lane. Remember before this thing called 9/11 happened? We were all sort of happy clams. We were just, a lot of us were living the good life. Pretty much any conference or trade show, excuse me, trade show theme that we put out there was working, and people were coming, and it was just a wonderful world. Then 9/11 hits, and we have to start making choices. We have to understand what kind of technology is coming around. We have to start thinking about doing more with less and still giving a full experience. And this whole business of putting out events, trade shows, conferences, meetings, started to get a little bit more difficult. And then about 2007, it started really heating up. The economy was doing much poorly than we had experienced. We thought, you know, when we got over the 9/11 hump, you know, we started to reorient ourselves and went back to doing things the way that we knew worked. And then the recession hit, and it sort of threw everything up for grabs once again, and all these questions came flying at us. And pretty soon, before you know it, it was an incredibly frustrating experience. There's so many choices to make. There's so much new technology out there. We need to reconfigure everything. And then the social media thing came at us faster than we could predict. And it just almost became overwhelming. So I want to, you know, first tell you what I'm going to talk about. The hierarchy of attendee needs is something that I developed after observing this whole attendee experience concept. I want you to also walk away with an understanding about, you know, Hillary, this control panel is kind of covering my, oh, there we go. Move it over to the side. How to understand your attendees holistically. There's a lot of work being done. I'm going to talk about that, about metrics and understanding your attendee from many different angles. I'm going to talk about what I think is the dirtiest word in B2B trade shows, and probably it's because of what we did to ourselves years ago. It's coming back to haunt us. I'm going to show you, lead you through a framework to convert your attendees into fans. I'm going to talk about some trends. I had the fortunate experience of participating in the EIBTM Tech Watch competition, and it helped me even more than I already feel I understand. It helped me understand what's out there in terms of technology that it will affect attendees going forward. And then I'm going to talk about 10 ways to really kill the attendee experience, which is really just a clever device to talk about the things that really work.
If you just double-click on your screen, it should.
Here we go. Sorry about that. So I've always been fascinated by this concept of the hierarchy of needs. I've really thought over the years about how much it fit with what we're doing in events in terms of motivations. And for those of you that have never heard of it, it's really something that dates back to 1943 when Abraham Maslow introduced this theory of motivation, what motivates people to really behave in the world. And his theory was really about, it's in a pyramid because as each level is sort of completed, then in terms of motivation, we can all move on to the next level. So, you know, at the bottom, we have to, first of all, learn how to breathe and where to get food, and, you know, we have to sleep, and we have to just sort of function on a human level before we can move to the next level, which is all of the safety things, the security issues. And then once we have that nailed down, we move on to all the other levels, the love, belonging, the esteem, the self-actualization. Well, I sort of co-opted this idea, and I also want to share with you that one dream I've always had is to live in a house on a street that was named after me. And since that hasn't happened yet, I decided to name my theory of the attendee hierarchy of needs after myself, because if I don't do it, who's gonna? But I adapted this hierarchy of needs concept to help trade show organizers, meeting planners, event organizers understand where to go, how to look at the attendee experience, how to make choices about technology, and not just technology, make choices about strategies and different offerings for the event. And I'm going to go through each of these things in detail in case it's a little bit difficult to see. But I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. And unlike Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have to sort of complete one level before you can move to the next, in my vision of this hierarchy of needs, it's not really a hierarchy. There's not much of a linear progression through these needs. I maintain that trade show organizers have to create their offerings and strategies and technology choices to make sure that they actually hit on every single level of this non-hierarchy. And I'll explain what that means as I go through this. So sort of my first level is sort of the basic things. As Maslow talked about, he was really saying that that bottom rung of the hierarchy was all about getting your basic needs in place, your food, your water, your air. There's also a level of offerings and technology that speaks to that from the attendee perspective. So in order to even experience an event, any event, these are the basic baseline things that any attendee needs. So we're talking about your food and beverage, and I'll explain that later. As a meeting planner and a conference organizer, that is one of the most important things to get nailed down. Your registration system, if that's not a satisfying experience, if that doesn't allow people to experience your event in a positive way, you're going to lose them. It also speaks to signage. You know, and I've interviewed groups that have actually done events in the Dallas, Texas Cowboys Stadium. Did you know they don't use signage? They actually use human beings to point people to where they're going. And for an average game, they'll get, what, 60, 70, 80,000 people with very minimal signage, because they believe, as an organization, that they treat all of their attendees as guests. And would you invite a guest to your home and then put up a big sign that said, here's where the food is and here's where the, you know, bathroom is? Well, maybe I would, because I'm practical that way. But signage is something to think about, how you direct people. Charging stations. I talked about this in the original TSNN blog post. I mean, why wouldn't you make it easy for people who now are running around with all their electronic devices to have plenty of places to recharge their phones and recharge their laptops and their iPads and whatever? It's now on this basic utility level. Wi-Fi is a huge issue. In the survey that came about, that TSNN issued before the event, the biggest issue in that survey was Wi-Fi. And it also really speaks to the fact that venues, now your choice of venues is so critically important. You have to address from the get-go this issue of Wi-Fi. In our survey, 90% of the respondents said that internet access is either important or extremely important to them experiencing the event. 90% believe that Wi-Fi should be free. Are we listening? And 60% of the survey respondents thought that the major costs should be borne by the venue, and another 35% said that the trade show organizers should bear the costs. So again, as an organizer, I'm talking to you when you're thinking about choosing venues, choosing offerings, technology. This Wi-Fi is a linchpin for you. The whole mapping issue, maps on mobile, maps, printed paper maps, maps on kiosks, it's a fundamental component of the attendee experience. I say transportation. I mean, if you've got a venue that is out in the middle of nowhere and there's no way to get to it conveniently and easily and inexpensively, you're going to lose them there. The exhibitor directory, now we have a lot of ways in which to offer an exhibitor directory, a conference agenda, all the floor plans, all of those things. Even thinking about ADA accommodations for the disabled, these are all things that we have to think about at a basic level that affect the attendee experience, and it's the very first thing you really have to look at. So this is, a picture of one of Market Art's floor maps, but you can see how if you can't navigate the event, if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where exhibitors are and all of those things, it's gonna ruin the attendee experience, and it's something that, again, you have to make choices about. How are you going to do this? The second level was justification. At this level, attendees need to be able to consume the content of the event in such a way that they can either prove to themselves that it was a valuable experience, or they can go back to their offices, share the content, and prove to their bosses that it was a valuable experience because their bosses, paid the bill. So at this level, we're really talking about consuming content, the ways in which we're allowing our attendees to see content. Maybe it's QR codes. There's a lot of discussion about these digital tote bags where, the organizer provides a kind of technology that allows the attendees to go around to all the booths, and instead of picking up brochures, you're picking up, digital brochures and PDFs and things like that. This level also speaks to your choices about session speakers, programming and show features for the show, the ways that attendees can actually capture content from the speakers in addition to the exhibitors. And it's also talking about post-show access to content. So it brings in sort of this virtual piece where, organizers now have to think about getting the content out before the event, during the event, after the event, and there's a lot of choices involved there. So QR codes, again, it's just one of the many ways that organizers and some exhibitors are choosing to disseminate content. And in our survey, 75% of the survey respondents said that if they saw a QR code, they would use it to take home exhibitor information. So think about that as an organizer. It speaks to helping your exhibitors use the ways of consuming content that are most effective. It's also putting QR codes or whatever ways are out there on your own event programming and content and sessions so that people can consume it more easily, more simply, be able to make it portable so they can take it back to the office. So it's just this idea of how to consume content, again, is another piece in the attendee experience. The other level is really this connection. People need to be able to experience your event. That's the utility level. Then they need to be able to consume the content. But they also need to be able to make a connection. This may be in the form of sharing experiences. It may be, learning from peers. and even exhibitors and speakers. But this part is really all about the matchmaking, the social media platforms that we have to consider. It's about this receptions. It's about this about games, flash mobs. You know, all of these things that are coming into play now. Maybe they're already out the door, but I've got a slide on flash mobs after this. Even golf tournaments and all of those sort of you know, attendee fun runs and stuff like that. All of these are really, really important to attendees to establish connections. And you do a lot of, attendees do a lot of networking, not on the show floor and not in the conference session room. So whatever you can do as an organizer, technology-wise or just by being clever, to increase these connections. I mean, it's a given. It's like, duh, we know this. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about some specific ways to improve that connection. Maybe you can have collaboration exercises. Collaboration is another big topic that's coming up in the world outside of trade shows and events. And even it may even boil down to how you do your place settings for lunch. I've heard of organizations literally doing it like a wedding, where you know it's a little bit more difficult to do, obviously, for a large group. But in smaller, more manageable groups, they've actually put down place settings and pre-arranged tables. So people come in for lunch, and they're with sort of a group that the organizers have selected so that it promotes networking. So there's a lot of little things. My last post on TSNN, I talked about SPIN. It's the Senior Planners Network. They do a thing where they have think tanks all around the country. And at each think tank, they give out badges to attendees. The attendees are other planners. And then when the think tank is over, they collect the badges. And at another think tank in another city, they give those badges out to the new group of attendees. And they request that the new group of attendees try and make connections with these people, which they have no idea who they are. And they recommend that they try and connect with them on social media. And then they ask them to report back to SPIN about how the connection was. So there's a lot of different ways to ensure that this connection happens. You have to be, you know, mindful of your audience to know what works. But again, connection is a really important piece of this whole puzzle. And remember this NRA, National Restaurant Association flash mob that they did? It kind of made its rounds as of, you know, last week when I pulled the slide. 31,000 people had viewed it, which is a pretty huge number, because I'm sure it was mostly people in our industry. But this is one way that the National Restaurant Association addressed this issue of connection. So all of these people, you know, got together and made it look like it was a random, let's just jump on the floor and start dancing. But it also speaks to what I think is sort of the dirtiest word in conferences, B2B conferences right now, and that's fun. When did we start, you know, thinking that if you have fun, it's not worth going to? You know, if you have a really good time and you come back to your office, that your boss will be mad that you went out and had a really good experience. But in reality, this issue of connection and having fun at an event is so critical, especially when you're thinking about the new generation of attendees coming in. This is one thing that they consistently talk about. I do a lot of articles on Gen Y and millennials, and it's the one thing. It's the one thing that draws them to the industry, and it's one thing that will keep them going to the events, is this idea of fun. And the really successful events that are happening right now, South by Southwest, Blog World, a lot of the events that have been launched maybe in the last couple of years are putting a fun element into it. The next level is recognition. So after you've kind of, or in conjunction with meeting all these other levels, this recognition piece is super, super important for our attendees. At EIBTM in Barcelona, they're going to have sort of they call it a speaker's corner, where it's like Hyde Park in London. So attendees can go to this speaker's corner and literally get on a soapbox and just talk about whatever they want to talk about, whatever's important to them, whatever kind of problem they need solving, things like that. But it's kind of a twist for us, because we always think of attendees as just being sort of passive participants in our events. and really they don't want to be. They want to get their 2 cents in. They want to have discussions other than with exhibitors. They want to have peer-to-peer discussions, and they want to let the whole world know what they're thinking about. So I also think Twitter falls, where you see who's tweeting on a hashtag, and it appears either in the background, or I've even seen it done with text walls, where people will actually text in messages, and the message appears on the wall. It's really compelling because it helps people get their ideas out, attendee ideas out. Question and answer periods is another area where we could really develop ways in which attendees would feel comfortable submitting questions and getting answers, but it's a way, again, for them to participate. Leaderboards with games. The fact that games are so are really starting to heat up in our industry, and that people love competition and they love to appear at the top of the leaderboard. When I've played, experimental games, you would not believe what attendees participating in the games will do for a badge, or it will do for a, you don't even have to give away an iPad, something cool like that. They'll do unbelievable things in terms of, your gaming situation in order to make it to the top of the leaderboard, and when you put them on teams. But again, it speaks to recognition. They want to be recognized. This next thing I'm going to show you, I did a blog post on my own blog, probably at least 2 months ago, and I was talking about different pop-up conference sessions and some things that I actually got the idea from South by Southwest. And this gentleman, his name's Peter Modigliani, contacted me. He commented on the blog and he emailed me, and he said, I've got a really great idea for attendee participation. And he calls it an innovation booth. And he, by the way, really isn't involved in our industry at all. He works for the Pentagon as a consultant that deals with collaboration. And this digital Pentagon blog, I urge you to go look at it. It's pretty interesting about how he can turn a giant bureaucracy like the Pentagon into sort of this collaborating, crowdsourcing, happy people machine. That's what his job is. And really, when you think about it, this sort of military-industrial complex that I call the trade show and conference industry needs some different ways that we can approach getting our participants involved in what we're doing. And this is the idea that he came up with, and he featured it on his blog. So let's just say you've got some dead space in your trade show, and you put, he's got a very simple setup here. You could even do it with a smart board, or something that would collect the ideas instead of on a piece of paper. But you just, you put the space in there. You invite people to come into the space. People meaning attendees. They write down their problems. They work with other people. Maybe another person would come by, and write the solution to the person's problem that he wrote down. You can draw crowds. You could have representatives from the organization, the planners there to see what the interaction is like, get new ideas. But it's a way for attendees to be recognized, and it's another way for event planners and trade show organizers to understand what it is that their attendees are thinking about. So I really like this idea of the innovation booth. And then finally, this sort of top level, this one thing that I think is so crucially important for the attendee experience is this level of understanding. Attendees now, as with other people in society, we want to feel like whatever we do has some meaning. We want to walk away from the experience having been profoundly impacted. And one of the ways that some organizations are doing that is through these charity outreach examples, where you have maybe your attendees come in and do Habitat for Humanity work, or, like SPIN. In their organization, they call it their geographic social responsibility. And it's, you go into the local community where you're having your event, and in their case, they filled up backpacks with school supplies for kids, and they got all their planners who were attending the conference, not all of them, but they said 70% of the planners that attended actually did this activity. And one of the most frequent comments that they got after it was all over was that they really enjoyed that experience, and it would make them come back. That sort of higher level understanding. You can also do it through your keynote speaker. Instead of looking for some there's so many to choose from. Someone that's entertainment, a comedian, a magician, whatever. Look for those that will profoundly impact the attendee experience, that will help your attendees walk away thinking, wow, I just learned something that I can take back to my personal or professional life, and it will change the way that I look at things and the way that I do things. One other way is maybe, mentoring programs are ways to sort of create this higher level of understanding that I'm talking about. So again, it's just another aspect of the complete picture of the attendee experience that we have to look at. So I'm going to next talk about the trends, and I don't know how we're doing here on time. We're getting pretty close. I've only got a couple more slides, but the trends that I saw through EIBTM, through what I practically interview people almost every day for different projects and articles that I'm working on. But these are sort of the top things that I'm seeing out there that I think are going to hugely impact our industry going forward, and extremely critical for us as organizers to get our arms around if we want to really profoundly change the attendee experience. So this notion of a holistic approach to attendee analytics, it sounds so wonky. I realize that. But what Google does, what Facebook does, I mean, they're wonderful companies, and they're trying to make us all happy people, but they're really in it for the data. And now we're seeing through the EIBTM entries I saw, through the discussions I've been having with colleagues, I'm seeing that this analytics piece, now that we have access to not only registration information, but social media information, and on-the-floor behavioral information through RFID and other tactics. And we put these all together in sort of a holistic box. If we as organizers actually look at everything that's in that box, we'll have the deepest level of understanding about the attendee. And if we have that understanding, we can create events and products and experiences around that understanding. So as companies perfect this sort of attendee analytics piece, I think it'll be hugely important for event organizers to really understand that and make sure that they're connected in that way to their attendees. It's going above and beyond the just sort of understanding that people that come to my event are, they have this title, or they, have this thing that they put in their own profile. It's understanding their behaviors and preferences to a level that, again, you can plan around it. This idea of convergence, I'm just going to kind of skip through this. The convergence piece is a lot of the technology used to be that you would have, for example, a mobile app for the mapping and the schedule and your agenda, and you'd have that. So that's in one box. In box number 2 would be another completely different app, which you use to do your social networking. And you have your event-centric social networking groups, sort of, like the Pathables and the Crowdvines and the, groups like that. We're only offering just that. Zarista is another one that started out in the social networking space. And then you would have another completely different app for, say, matchmaking on the trade show floor. Now, these are all coming in to be one service. And usually, it appears that the platform of choice for the convergence is mobile. So mobile apps now are offering the social networking, and they're offering the matchmaking, and they're offering the the social media outreach experiences, and then all the utility tools, the maps of the show and the conference agendas and all those things. It's all kind of converging into one application, and that's really good news, because it was driving event planners crazy to figure out what all the apps and technology they needed in order to have a complete show and appeal to the attendees. Now it's all converging into one, so that's something that we really have to think about. And when you're making choices, for example, about specific technologies, look for the ones that are appealing to this idea of convergence. It'll be easier for you. Just make sure that all of the elements that they're bringing in, they're competent on. But convergence is a big trend going forward. Geolocation. I mean, it sounds so out there, but there are so many different schemes now for geolocation. It started out where, through our mobile phones, we were able to use geolocation, technology to pinpoint where people are on the trade show floor, to find other people. That was the first thing. Then we moved into being able to pinpoint locations using RFID. So you have this radio frequency identification technology, and you could see literally from your computer screen where people are, what they're doing in your conference or in your trade show booth, how they're behaving, and then map it into some other sort of metrics to have this piece that matched what they were doing and how they were behaving to their titles and things like that. But the third type of geolocation that's happening now is using the Wi-Fi system within the exhibition hall or the conference space. And one of the runner-ups at EIBTM has a system where he's actually figured out how to figure out where everyone, in the meeting space is at, in order to, work on matchmaking and more effective ways to connect people. So geolocation is going to continue to be really, really important, and I think it's one of the most exciting things because it's really sort of that missing link for doing matchmaking really, really well. Another thing, which is it indirectly speaks to attendee experience, in that both on mobile, we saw a couple of instances in the TechWatch competition, and even in virtual event spaces. InExpo has a great sort of, I call it do-it-yourself platform, but really it's, the technology is configured in such a way that the event planner can now actually upload their own content. And I think that's going to start being more prevalent as we go forward. The near-field communication, the EIBTM winner, ITN, figured out how to use a near-field communication chip in a card that also worked in the Amsterdam mass transit system. So you have a card, or in the future it will be on your mobile phone, and you'll be able to make purchases, you'll be able to navigate around the show, because the near field will bounce off of different points. You'll be able to match make because you can make connections. I mean, it'll do so many things, and as soon as the NFC-enabled phones actually become available here, it's going to completely change our attendee experience. The whole games on mobile, again, it brings in that fun element, but the thing about games and the fact that they're now being deployed on mobile is that they're so accessible, and games aren't just, I mean, games is kind of another dirty word. People think that, if you're doing a mobile game, it's just all about, getting people's mind off of their daily issues. But what it is a very clever and appealing way to disseminate information, to help people make connections, to actually achieve some of the goals that you as an event planner want to achieve using games that you can't achieve any other way. So I'm going to, I know there'll be some questions on games, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, give you some examples. And then this idea of social mapping. This, to me, is incredibly exciting, and if you haven't taken or heard about what Market Art's doing with Presto, it's a really exciting situation, and I've seen attempts at it outside of our industry, but when you really think about having the ability to connect people using interactive mapping and then layering on their social profiles and their LinkedIn profiles, and imagine being able to now find where you're going in the show, connect with other people, and then being able to actually access their social media profiles on top of that. in addition to whatever profile information they included during registration. I mean, you'll have all of this information as an attendee in the palm of your hand, and as an organizer, it's going to be super important going forward that you give that information to the attendees so that they can make more effective connections and experience the event in a really incredibly different way. So just quickly, I mean, you don't want to make people wait in lines. I always thought, you know, at CES, for example, or Comdex years ago when you're waiting in line for a taxi, why don't they service hors d'oeuvres or, you know, cocktails in line? I mean, if you have to wait, make it a pleasant experience. It's something that I want you to think about as an event organizer. This idea of waiting in a real-time world is a real experience killer. You know, obviously eliminating choices, both choices about how to participate, the days on which to participate, the price to pay, the different levels of participation. It's going to be really extremely important going forward, and if you eliminate choices for people, they'll lose interest in your event. Obviously, if you want a deal killer, make participation difficult. Don't give them easy ways to experience your event. Don't speak to that utility piece in the attendee hierarchy, you know, and keep them in the dark. You know, don't keep them constantly updated, not about your event, but on what's going on in the industry so that they know that you're in their corner. And, you know, don't change ever. Don't, you know, from year to year, don't do anything different, you know, if you want to kill the experience. Serve horrible food. As a meeting planner, #1 complaint. The salad sucked. You know, I hated the fact that, you know, dessert was sitting on the table all that time. So, you know, think about food. Most meeting planners know this, but it's really important. Overload them with shiny objects. Throw so much at them that they don't know which end is up. That's an attendee experience killer. Disconnect them from the world. Again, we're talking about this Wi-Fi. It has to work. They have to have access to their mobile phones, so they can't, you know, be in venues that don't really have their eye on that connectivity. You know, organize lame activities. In my personal opinion, I don't see how organizations can still have the evening gala closing event at an event. I mean, the weirdest thing for me ever has been, like, you know, having dinner and then, you know, seeing a band play on a stage and then dancing with my colleagues. That has always seemed really weird to me. I'm seeing a lot of different kinds of activities happening that really center more on attendee preferences and hobbies and passions to get them jazzed about coming back to your event. And then finally, for sure, make sure they have at least a $60 or an $80 cab ride. When I went to Content Marketing World a couple months ago, they were really great about this. They chose a venue that was at the end of the metro line, and they gave us specific instructions on how to walk from our airplane gate to the metro, pay $2.50, ride the train right down, get off, turn right, and there was the hotel, the host hotel. I thought it was brilliant. So again, it's another, you know, experiential thing that event organizers have to keep into consideration. And you can Google me, or you can contact me on, you know, any of these channels. I would be happy to answer your questions later on. I know, Hillary, you're going to jump in and tell them what we have in store. But while you're thinking about what questions you're going to ask, we've got a couple of things to share with you. And Hillary, I'm tossing it back to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Michelle. Well, now I'd like to turn the floor over to Steve Snyder, who is the Chief Information Officer and Chief Technology Officer for the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. And the MCCA operates 3 convention centers and a parking garage for the state of Massachusetts. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Hillary. I bring a little different perspective, and that being the perspective of the venue. We've embraced technology to the point that my boss, our executive director, says frequently that we are the most technologically advanced convention centers on the planet. Those are really big shoes to walk in for us as a technology team. We have a staff of about 42 folks that really do a stellar job of delivering the technology to the clients and attendees. And that's on a focused on folks that own the building, that live in the building, and that understand the buildings, maintain it, and maintain that infrastructure. So we have also embraced the mobile workforce internally as well as from an attendee and exhibitor standpoint. We were the first convention center out there to do free wireless in all of our facilities. And since doing that in 2004, 2005, we've replaced our wireless infrastructure 4 times to keep on top of changing technologies from a wireless perspective. That speaks to Wi-Fi itself. But beyond that, we also embraced the need for good cellular communications, both 3G, 4G, and we've replaced our distributed antenna system in our facilities twice in order to support emerging technologies and to provide ubiquitous cellular coverage and Wi-Fi coverage that attendees and exhibitors and our clientele have grown to expect, just like lights, and heating, and air conditioning. So that's our focus on how do we do technology to lead that technology charge and make it easy for people to do business in Boston. We were also the first convention center out there with iPad apps, iPhone apps, Android apps, and BlackBerry apps targeted around wayfinding and actually show-related content. So that's kind of it in a nutshell as to our methodology about trying to provide a better customer experience.
Terrific. Thank you, Steve. All right, well, I'm going to open up the Q&A now, and as a reminder, you can join the Twitter conversation or ask questions there with hashtag Attendex, and that's ATTENDEX, or you can write in your questions right into the question area of the control panel. So let's go with, here's a first question I have coming up here. And Michelle, which is the preferred social network space or mix to promote your B2B conference sponsorship or appearance?
That's a big question. My answer to that is there is no right way, number one. Number two is it's not about the platforms, it's about your objectives. So number three, the third part of that is knowing fundamentally and at a deep level where your prospects are on social media channels, whether they're on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever they are, and meeting them there. So there is really no preferred social network space because it's going to completely depend on your audience, where your current and past attendees are, where your prospects are, and the only way you're going to know that is if you take some of these holistic approaches to observing their behavior, seeing what they're doing on social media channels and where they're doing it, looking at their attendee registration data, which, by the way, you should be collecting their social media handles and, addresses. You should know, if they're on Twitter, they'll have a Twitter name. They'll have a Twitter handle. If they're on LinkedIn, then you should know what their profile, URL is to their profile. You should be asking these questions. And then form your plan for your sponsorship appearance or to promote your conference around that information.
Terrific, thank you. I've got a couple of questions regarding the exhibit hall, and I think that everybody can kind of pop in here because this is a detailed question. How do attendees approach the exhibit hall? Do they avoid it at all costs? Do they seek out new products? Do they feel like it's a sales feeding frenzy? And how can show organizers guide exhibitors to collaborate to create the desired environment on the show floor?
Well, I'll kick off that answer if anyone else wants to chime in.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that I really think that the trade show floor configuration and the behaviors that we've developed over the last 50 years are about the most unfriendliest, behaviors and environment that there is for connection, especially given the fact that the way that we connect today is much different than we did 50 years ago, except the trade shows still look identical. So call me crazy, but I really think that, you know, as organizers, as an industry, we have to be looking at both the environment that's created on the trade show floor. We have to start viewing what happens there as content that our attendees and customers want to consume, and create an environment that's comfortable and simple, easy to navigate, and where people want to be. If you're an organizer and you're having trouble getting people to the trade show floor, you better find out why, and you better find out what it is about your trade show floor that is so darn unappealing, and take it from there. So go on, Rob.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to jump in and say, I recently heard Skip Cox with Exhibit Survey speaking, and he was talking about, he'd interviewed attendees who are attending primarily trade shows, but going to the exhibits themselves is far and beyond the #1 reason these attendees were going in a general survey. So I just want to make the point that attendees do want to interact with the exhibitors, and they do want to have that experience of being able to see multiple products and meet with multiple people at the right time. It's just a matter of helping them do that in the way that makes the most sense for them.
And Steve, did you want to jump in at all?
Well, I can jump in from my perspective. I don't spend a lot of time, you know, actually attending very many trade shows. But what drives me out there on the floor is meeting people and talking about products, and that face-to-face interaction is what really drives my relationship out there on the show floor. And frequently, from a venue's perspective, I'm out on the show floor asking what the experience around the exhibitors, actually about the exhibitors' experience, to find out what we can do better to make it more conducive to do business with us.
Okay. Well, here's a question, and maybe you can start this one out. What are some of the new strategies to get and keep exhibitors and sponsors?
There are so many. I'm biased in terms of what I think is the best strategy. Again, I go back to knowing at a fundamental level who your prospects and attendees are, so that you can market to them in a way that's palatable, and that they'll be open to your information. But, you know, I pose this question to any event organizer out there that's promoting their event. What attendee is like sitting there waiting for your promotional information to arrive? You know, you need to think about how that's delivered, and, you know, think of new strategies like content marketing, like building up your blog and the content on your blog in order to, you know, reach attendees in a different way, and quit pushing out all your messaging, you know, day after day after day, because after a while people aren't listening.
Great advice. Okay. Here's an interesting question, and I know this is important with MCCA, but Michelle, maybe you have some advice that you've seen happen. That here's a question. I know Wi-Fi was a big topic. Could you talk about outside vendors when the exhibit hall has an ineffective Wi-Fi service? Or
Oh, I bet Steve has an opinion on this one, but that's
I do, but I'll keep my mouth shut.
Well, no, I mean, it's important. For one thing, I mean, Wi-Fi is a huge issue. We know that. But it's, you know, there's a couple of ways to look at it. There is technology out there that you can, it doesn't have the huge range that the Wi-Fi would have throughout the entire convention center. But when exhibitors feel that the Wi-Fi connection in the convention center is inadequate, they can turn to this other technology. Now, that creates a lot of problems in some ways, but it also answers a lot of, it speaks to needs of the exhibitors in other ways. So there is this ongoing dialogue. And at the end of the day, we have to decide, perhaps as an industry, how we're going to handle it. We don't want to take away choices from exhibitors and from trade show organizers that need that boost in Wi-Fi. On the other hand, it's unfair to the to the venue who has put in an infrastructure, hopefully to meet the needs of their tenants, and then have someone come in and sort of, interfere with the signal and all the different things. So I think, there are two sides to the story. I think we need to sit down and have a discussion as an industry about it, but there is no easy answer.
Okay,
what do you think, Steve?
What's that?
What do you think?
Well, we spend a lot of money making sure that we have a network in place, a Wi-Fi network in place, and a wireless network. It's really second to none, and we actively monitor our network during the shows to figure out what our bandwidth usage is. Have we allocated enough bandwidth? Do we need to pull more bandwidth? So, we groom that network on a fairly religious basis. But I think from a venue's perspective, when you have an attendee exhibitor spending the kind of money that they spend to get here, the last thing I want to do is nickel and dime them on, a non-free type of service, which we originally started out with, but we were seeing a 1 to 2% usage by attendees. As soon as I opened up the network in a free mode, I was seeing a 30 to 40% usage by attendees. So I believe it should be free. We have the systems in place that allow us to isolate and find rogue access points and devices that are creating problems within our network for the attendees and exhibitors. And we go out and actively prune those devices where we need to because they're interfering. But if there's a real need to shut down a portion of the building because somebody wants to do something different within the facility with different technology, we have shut down portions of the building and brought in the client's technology and done that as well. So it's really dependent on what the customer wants, but we really are very strong about wanting to provide a good user experience in the buildings.
Yeah, and I'm here as an advocate for the attendee. I mean, I've been to many events where, the Wi-Fi connection was inadequate, and I would have given anything, to have an outside technology available to augment that, and it's selfish. But if we as event organizers are looking at the attendee experience, there are a lot of elements in play here, and we need to, the organizer needs to have a sit down with the venue and figure out, realistically what they need to pull off this event, especially if it's going to pull, internet juice more than usual. So, I'm glad there's options out there, but I do understand both sides.
Well, to kind of further that answer, Michelle, if the show organizer has limited resources, which trends should we invest in for the short term, and which trends should we invest in for the long term? Okay, certainly I'm going to go with the long term first. Look at those 7 trends that I've listed for you, because I've had my eye on them, and it's not just me. My colleagues and I have these discussions all the time about what's coming up and what we should be prepared for. In the long term, which is really maybe 1 to 2 years tops, there's no long term anymore. There's no, planning it out for 5 years like we used to do. But okay, let's just say, over the next 2 years, look at those long-term trends, those 7 that I mentioned. In the short term, you want to look at 2 things. If you go back to my attendee hierarchy, what you want to make sure that you do is choose technologies that if they can, hit on all the levels. And mobile is one of the ones that can do that, maybe with the exception of the sort of higher level understanding, although I'm sure we'll get there. But it can provide that utility, it can provide the connection, it can provide the recognition piece through the gaming elements. So whatever you choose, whatever approach, whatever technology in the short term, make sure it's hitting all those different levels. And I would even take that a step further. If you're comparing a specific technology between 2 vendors, look at the one that hits all the different levels
and look at the one that meets your objectives more efficiently. I mean, it's not just about the technology. It's really about what you as an organization need to get accomplished right now. And I've got some, there are resources out there. I wrote a buyer's guide to mobile apps. If you just Google buyer's guide to mobile apps, it'll come up in a couple of different places. And it will, it sort of outlines a strategy for choosing mobile apps, but it's a strategy that can work for any technology. And I think it is a framework for really looking at what's out there, and in the short term trying to use this hierarchy framework to look at what you should be selecting. Maybe it's not always technology. Maybe maybe your objectives are such that a technology, a shiny object is not the answer. That happens too.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question here. We're getting to the top of the hour, but let's have a fun question. What app-based exhibitor attendee interaction games are folks seeing used successfully?
Well, there's a couple. If anybody that's seen the presentation on TED by the person that developed the group, the guy that developed Scavenger, event organizers are using Scavenger, which is basically a scavenger hunt using your mobile phone. There's another product out there called Double Dutch, which is sort of a Foursquare for events. People are using that. Quick Mobile, which is the company out of Toronto, is doing a lot with mobile gaming and games in general. Obviously they're a mobile developer, so they do their stuff on mobile platforms. But they did an app for GMIC, the Global Meetings Sustainability Group, which was very successful, and there are case studies online about that. They recently did one for a Colorado-based organization they called Mountain Travel Symposium. They did a game where their attendees were put through different exercises, but bear in mind that this game, one of the major goals of the event organizer was to get as many photos uploaded and grab content from the event for their social media channels after the fact. So they played a game where one of the things that the attendees had to do was upload photos, and they would get points and various incentives. So there is a lot of gaming activity going on right now. People also trying to figure out what are the best games and stuff. Again, it goes back to what are your objectives, and is a gaming strategy going to get you there? It's not about the game.
All right. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing these tips and technology, and we really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
And we'd also like to thank everyone for attending, and also thank our sponsors, MCCA, Advantage Boston, and Market Art, for bringing this presentation to you. And as a reminder, because I've gotten a, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was saying thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
Terrific. Well, I'm getting a few other questions. I just want to say, as a reminder, the recording and the slide deck will be available within 2 days on tsn.com. And we really appreciate your attendance. Thank you for being here, everyone. Have a great day.